These are some of the sights and sounds of Pennhurst, the state institution for the mentally retarded. It's located in Spring City, Chester County. In 1908, when the institution first opened, the man in charge bitterly complained to the state that the conditions were already overcrowded. He transferred many of the patients to Q1, a classroom building. Many of them are still there. In the 18th century, the mentally retarded were often ignored, punished, and exploited. Today, things are supposed to be different. Modern 20th century man is much more scientific and civilized. Today, we no longer punish the mentally retarded. We don't exploit them either. We have come a long, long way. Now we ship them 25 miles out of town to a state-operated institution and forget them while they decay from neglect. Pennhurst was first opened 60 years ago when the answers to the problem of mental retardation were considered to be segregation and sterilization. Sterilization, of course, is a thing of the past, but the archaic practices of segregation and custodial care are still with us and seemingly with the approval of society. The 2,800 children, young and old alike, residing within the confines of Pennhurst are for the most part protected from society, and the granite wall of ignorance and social blindness protects society from them. These unfortunates are being deprived of their dignity and self-respect. Why? Because only a very, very few seem to care. The horrible and almost inhumane conditions that prevail at Pennhurst are not the fault of a handful of dedicated doctors, administrators, and attendants employed there. No, the children, as they are all called, who are rotting in their cages, cribs, and beds, can thank society for their dreadful plight. We have forsaken them, not in the sense of what we have done to them, but because of what we have failed to do on their behalf. Unlike other minority groups, the mentally retarded have never had a brilliant orator to trumpet their suffering and appeal to the conscience of other men. Many of these children have always been without the benefit of parental love or guidance, partly because of the stigma of shame attached to their illness. They have been abandoned and placed at the mercy of the state. In the case of Pennhurst, the state has failed to do its moral duty. During the next 4 evenings, TV10 will delve into the problems of Pennhurst. We hope to find out why the current conditions exist. What are the problems facing the people running the institution? What has been accomplished in the past? And what must be done to correct the injustices the mentally retarded have endured much, much too long. We entitle our investigative report, Suffer the Little Children. There is not only a shortage of help here at Pennhurst, but also a lack of money and an overextension of professional duties. As we mentioned last evening, the personnel employed here are for the most part dedicated, but even the most sincere people can be pushed beyond their professional capabilities. One case in point are the physicians. There are only 9 MDs and 2 psychiatrists working at the institution on a full-time basis. They are responsible for 2,800 sick children. Society's children. This fact sometimes forces medical personnel to work beyond their limitations and serve as disciplinarians. One case in point, Dr. Jesse Fear, a medical doctor. I question him on just how he handles patients with behavior problems.
We have found of late that it is quite effective to downgrade him a little bit and put him on a a locked cottage with autistic-type children or hyperactive children, a classification that used to be called low grades, or that sort of thing, and it offends their dignity somewhat. They don't like it.
Well, you offend their dignity on purpose by putting them on this profoundly retarded ward. In other words, say a child with an IQ of, say, 69 or so would be put on in a cottage with children with an IQ of 10 or 20, and this is how you lower their dignity. Do you find this an effective measure?
We have found it in some cases to be effective, but in other cases, why, it doesn't work out.
Doesn't this degrade the person who is being disciplined to the point that he may regress?
I doubt it very much. Actually, what we're trying to do is degrade him to a certain extent amongst his fellows here. They make fun of him then for a while afterwards. But I don't think there's anything inhumane about it or anything of that sort.
How else do you deal with patients that are hyperactive?
I have given some of them intravenous pentobarbital sodium on occasion. Otherwise, they would do harm to themselves and others.
In other words, you drug them?
Absolutely.
Dr. Fear, can you cite just one example which shows the institution's attitude towards children that need just a little extra help?
John is a problem that I think can be resolved if he is exposed to the right form of therapy. And so far here, we have not been able to show any benefit from what we have given him. There are places, and specifically Eastern State has a program that seems to help this type of case quite a bit. I had tried to get him into a Catholic organization. It turned out that his IQ wasn't quite high enough for them to accept him.
So where is Johnny now, Doctor?
They do not accept retardates.
What's Johnny's IQ now?
69. But that is a relative thing.
Where is Johnny now?
Johnny is on Q2.
You have just heard about Johnny. He's been causing discipline problems here at Pennhurst, so they thought they would send him to Q2. We thought you would like to see where Johnny lives. Johnny, can you talk?
Yes.
Do you like it here at Pennhurst?
No.
Why not, John? Let me ask you this, John. Do you remember living anywhere except Pennhurst?
No.
Do you like talking to the people up here?
Yeah.
Why, John?
And they like to talk to me.
How about the other kids, the ones that can talk? Do they like to talk to you, too?
Yes.
Do you like to talk to them better than the kids up here?
Yes.
Have you been talking more lately or less?
Less.
Why are you here in Q2, John?
I did something where I wasn't supposed to be doing.
And so they punished you and put you here?
Yes.
Do they do this all the time to you, John?
Yes.
Johnny used to talk a lot more before he came to Q2, but ever since he's been here, he's talking less all the time. This boy, was he mentally retarded when he came to Pennhurst?
He was mentally retarded in the sense that he did not receive proper education. He came from parents that were delinquent themselves.
In other words, this boy was normal as far as his mind and being retarded was concerned.
He can progress to a normal level.
But he never will as long as he's here at Pennhurst, is that right?
I cannot say that because...
what are the chances?
Chances are poorer here than they would be where they have a program set up for this type of case.
There are too many Johnnies in Pennhurst this very evening. Unless the state provides more competent personnel and facilities, they will remain just where they are, stripped of their dignity, lost to society. Just how long will that be? Well, I guess since they are our children, it's up to us, isn't it? Some zoos in the United States spend more money for the daily upkeep of their large animals than the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania allows Pennhurst to spend on its 2,800 retarded children. 5 of the largest zoos spend $7.15 per day on their wards. Pennhurst can only afford $5.90. By the way, 80% of that $5.90 pays the administrative costs at the institution. This leaves a meager 75 cents to provide for the basic day-to-day needs of the retarded. The zoo also usually wins out over the retarded when it comes to accommodations. Very rarely do you find crowded cages at the zoo, but it's quite common to find residents bunched into small cottages at Pennhurst. I spoke with the superintendent of Pennhurst, Dr. L. Pekonski, about the overcrowded conditions at the institution.
Yes, our rated capacity is 1,984. And
how many people do you have?
We currently have 2,791.
How many people do you need here at Pennhurst?
I'd like to see our 1,500 people on in our personnel complement. And in order to pay these extra 700 people, we'd probably need about $4 million.
Doctor, when was the last time the Secretary of Health and Welfare or the Governor visited here at Pennhurst?
Secretary of Welfare was here approximately 6 weeks ago.
What were his comments after he saw the deplorable conditions, the rundown facilities, the overcrowding, the lack of help? What was his feeling? What did he tell you?
Secretary George said that let's do everything we can to alleviate conditions at Pennhurst and place Pennhurst in top priority for clearing up things.
In other words, he put Pennhurst ahead of the other state institutions?
He made this statement, yes, sir.
Did he promise any money or help from the state?
He said that if we needed money, he would see that we got it.
And you need $4 million.
Again, ideally. I don't intend that Pennhurst is going to get $4 million. I think we're going to get some help.
I also spoke with the business manager here at Pennhurst, Elmer McSurdy. I questioned him on the cost of repairing the buildings.
Can't touch a building unless you're ready to spend $1 million or $1.5 million. Now, as long as the buildings stand the way they are, the law doesn't require that they come in and close it down.
Some of them should be closed down, shouldn't they?
I presume if the labor industry were to inspect them as they stand now with the idea in mind that they must meet their requirements, they would be closed.
Could you tell us a little about the problems you have faced purchasing necessities since Pennhurst has been on its most recent austerity program? Could you tell us a little about the situation with the braziers?
Well, there was an order for braziers. It was canceled. We were given the opportunity to justify the requisitions.
How did you try to justify it?
On braziers. Well, on that one, I just wrote self-evident.
What happened then?
It came back with a large group of requisitions for more justification.
More justification.
Yes.
Did you justify it further?
I had one of our doctors write a justification.
Did you finally get them?
No.
People seldom think of food as being a problem. I spoke to the dietitian here, Elizabeth Roberts.
We have some patients who cannot tolerate whole food. We have to puree that food, but they get a well-balanced diet. We puree meats, vegetables, and we try to put bright color in this pureed mass of food so that it is attractive to the eye. You know, they say eye appeal and taste appeal is that's what we strive for.
The facts presented in this report must be rather alarming because they are true. After comparing the zoo and Pennhurst, one must get the impression that society's animals are more important than society's children. By the looks of things, one must wonder. Tomorrow night we will bring you part 4 of Suffer the Little Children.
Attaboy, now put the next one on. That's it.
This means happiness to most, but to the mentally retarded, it means life itself. This boy and 213 others just like him are enrolled in special rehabilitation programs at Pennhurst. Thanks to these limited projects, they are improving their mental and physical skills by leaps and bounds. The director of several of these programs, M. Harris Schaefer, explains how a little help in money can go a long way.
A program has been developed at Pennhurst State School and Hospital, federally funded, to work with and habilitate the severely and profoundly retarded. Here we see music therapy, in which we are working with the emotional levels of the youngsters and developing emotional response. Many of these youngsters had never had the opportunity to handle and work with tools that so many normal children take for granted. Learning to cut, learning to crayon, learning to develop their ABCs. Feeding is a very, very important part of the program. It's so essential that the youngsters be made to be self-supporting, self-contributing, and develop dignity and worth through being able to care for themselves. And so the total interdisciplinary staff works together in order to help the youngsters achieve in this area. Many of the youngsters in the program were unable to walk. Many were unable to talk. Many were unable to dress themselves, to socialize. These are the areas that are being worked upon by the staff. The empathy that one is able to develop in relating to other objects in the world, to animals, this is important to the youngsters. First opportunities in many cases, a feeling, a pride. Programming for the blind and visually handicapped is an area which is the first of its kind in its totality throughout the United States. Pennhurst is showing leadership in this particular area. Many of the youngsters at present are away at a camp for the blind for a 2-week period. Again, we see an interdisciplinary team working with the youngsters, boys and girls, in order to attain the possibility for community placement. In many of these programs, we've developed to the point where an 8-month period has enabled youngsters to develop 14 months of growth during that space of time. A work activity center is a newly developed program at Pennhurst. A project involving 12,000 items for Smith, Klein, and French is now coming to a close. This has been a new experience, not only for the youngsters, but for the institution, and it's hoped that many other projects will be available. These children are able to earn money for themselves, by which they are able to use for books, magazines, things of their own choice. They develop the experiences that may be necessary in the community.
Mr. Schaefer, can you tell us a little bit more about other programs here at the institution?
Yes. There are many programs at Pennhurst to enhance the dignity and worth of the residents within the institution. We are very proud of these. Some of them pertain to vocational rehabilitation, psychological counseling, town task programs,
other activities, programs, nursing and medical programs and services throughout. Indeed, we're quite proud of the developments at Pennhurst. We have been leaders in the state and leaders within the United States, and we're very thankful for the support and leadership from the superintendent and from the agencies of the Department of Public Welfare.
It's hard to believe that blocks like these can mean so much. Proper facilities and funding has given over 200 boys and girls at Pennhurst somewhat of a new lease on life. However, 2,600 others have little to look forward to because of a lack of funds, facilities, and staff. Recently, Governor Raymond Schaefer announced that $43.5 million in revenue would be turned back to the Commonwealth. Many of us are hoping some of that money finds its way to Pennhurst. Meanwhile, 2,800 retarded children there will be hoping and praying that the governor hasn't forgotten them.
Tonight we conclude our 5-part special investigative report, Suffer the Little Children. Before we begin tonight's final installment, it is with great regret that I tell you that reporter Bill Baldini, who has worked continuously on the series, has practically collapsed from sheer exhaustion and is unable to read the words which he has written to finish the series. So it is with considerable pride that I conclude this report for him. Bill wrote as follows: "We have brought the sights and sounds of Pennhurst into your homes in their most brutal and constructive forms. We have explored the reasons why the horrendous conditions exist, the problems facing the people running the institution, and what they have accomplished. Tonight we'll show you another view of Pennhurst. This one is from the inside out."
What would you like? If I can give you anything in the world, what would you want?
I'd like to get out of Pennhurst.
If you can have anything in the world, what would you want?
But I like to have, but I'll tell you this, I have a little bit of money myself.
Would you rather have money or would you rather leave Pennhurst?
I'd rather leave Pennhurst.
Even if you didn't have any money?
That's right.
Philip and Calvin have only a slim chance of obtaining their wish in the near future, because only 7% of the children at Pennhurst are enrolled in rehabilitation projects. Why? Because the institution does not have the staff nor the facilities, not to mention money to expand its programs. While these 200 children learn cooperation and development of emotional response, many others rock in silence in their stench-filled, overcrowded cottages. While some children are afforded the opportunity to go on a picnic and bask in the sun, others lie awake in their beds, shackled like prisoners, punished because they cannot control themselves in their illness. In many cases, if more attendants were available, some of the patients would be utilizing their energies to talk instead of breaking society's bonds. All of the patients in Pennhurst are not hopeless idiots or mangled cripples. Many of them walk and talk, but lack the opportunity to progress to society's accepted levels. However, if they were afforded this opportunity to return to the outside world, one must wonder how they, the retarded, would act.
Where would you go, Earl, if you left here?
I would go down in the hospital to work.
To
work for sick people, take care of sick people.
The conditions at Pennhurst have been withering for quite a while because of the lack of public interest. The institution is a monument to apathy and will remain that way until change can be brought about by concerned action. This social indifference stresses the hangover of 19th century philosophy, which condemns the mentally retarded to a bare existence in facilities like Pennhurst. These children can be helped, and they are depending on society to care enough about them.
Do the people outside love you? Do they care about you?
Well, I haven't been around them not been around them enough to see that.
But do you think they care about you?
I think so.
Who cares about you?
None of my parents don't care for me.
How about other people?
The other people, they don't care for you, so just go look for trouble, that's all.
How about the people who don't live in Pennhurst? Do you think they care about you?
No.
The retarded have been ignored, forgotten, and pushed out of our minds much too long. In some cases, their feeling of being abandoned has stunned their progress. Others have just become more bitter.
Do you have a lot of visitors, Calvin?
No, I don't have nobody been here. It's not bad. I've been in this, now this institution when I came here in Vibrate. I was a little baby.
When was the last time you had a visitor here?
1940.
1940.
They walked out on me.
Who walked out on you, Calvin?
My sister did.
There seems to be no compassion for human life when it comes to the retarded. A typical prescription for a child that gets out of hand by at least one physician is harsh disciplining. Dr. Jesse Fear relates one instance he was directly involved in.
This one day I was running dispensary, and one of the boys came in there, and he had an awful big welt on the back of his head. And I'd been hearing about this fellow, but this was the first time that I ran across something concrete. The boy told me he did it. When dispensary was over, I came out the back way, and there was this Ernie sitting on a railing at the back of the canteen. And I was really hot and bothered at the time. And I said, listen, you so-and-so, you touch one of my boys again, and I personally am going to take care of you myself.
Who did this, Doctor? The attendant?
No, it was a
one
patient.
of the patients heard another patient.
Yeah.
I see.
Ernie was a patient. So, he says, you don't dare to touch me. There's nothing you can do to me. I says, well, before this day is out, you're going to find out what I can do for you. And then I had to start thinking about what I could do. I didn't know what I could do. So about 1 o'clock, a detail man came in, and I asked him what the most painful injection was that he had that wouldn't do any harm to the patient, of course. And I set this up and got him over on his cottage about 7 o'clock that night. And I forced him, I talked him into getting down on the bed. I didn't use any abuse on him at all. And gave him this injection, and he really hit the ceiling over that.
Why do you think Pennhurst is in the condition it is?
I think Pennhurst is in the condition it's in because nobody cares. The general community either doesn't know or doesn't want to know what the situation is out there. Many of the children are victims of neglect of their own family, and in many instances it's almost understandable because the parents have no choice in the matter. And it must be a dreadful, dreadful feeling for a parent to know that their own child is living under such conditions. People may not even want to say anything about it because they may be afraid of reprisals. But this condition, this horrible, horrible condition at Pennhurst must not be permitted to exist. It is, without a doubt, one of the worst residential facilities in the country. It received a very low rating from the American Association for Mental Deficiency. There is no reason in this day and age, with federal funds available, for such a place to exist. And if you have to lay the blame somewhere, you have to lay it on a number of people. The people that are running it, the state, and the general community. Because people must begin to care about their fellow man.
The sickening and almost unviewable conditions of the institution is largely due to overcrowding and the lack of personnel to provide elementary care. In many cases, children churn in their own filth for only one reason: lack of assistance. The ones that speak detest the inhumane conditions and hunger for the slightest sign of affection. However, some of them have become so callous to their plight, they've all but given up. They are alone in a world that seems to lack all compassion. In conclusion, TV10 would like to make certain constructive recommendations. Number one, the state must take the necessary steps to alleviate the overcrowding at Pennhurst. Of its 2,800 patients, half of whom are from Philadelphia, 900 of them should be transferred to a different institution. Number two, more physicians are needed to treat both the physical and mental needs of the patients. 3, attendance pay should be increased from the present $75 per week to at least $100 per week. 4, a crash program is needed to refurbish old buildings, and new ones should be built to replace the ones that should be condemned. 5, there are 900 women in Penhurst. However, there is no gynecologist on the full-time staff. 6, there are only 11 teachers employed at the institution, and none of them is certified in special education. Even though some choose to degrade and castigate the children, a number of the patients manage to hang on and maintain their faith in other human beings, as well as something of a higher order.
Joe, how long have you been in Penhurst? Do you know how long you've been here, Joe? That you remember?
I was 19 when I first came back.
How old are you now, Joe?
20.
You want to go home?
Yeah, I like to.
Who's going to take you home?
Nobody.
Why, Joe?
They don't want me to.
You mean the people don't want you to go home with them?
Nope.
You mean your mother and father?
My mother's in Lovington, Virginia Hospital. I can't go down there and see her.
Uh-huh. How about your daddy?
No.
He doesn't want you. Who loves you the most, Joe?
My mother.
Yeah? Who else?
My father.
Who cares about you? Does anyone ever come and visit you, Joe?
No, they don't.
Would you like somebody to visit you?
Yes.
Who would you like most in the whole world? A what? What would you like most in the whole world?
The whole world?
Mm-hmm.
God.
Suffer children to come to me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of God. In my conversation yesterday with Vice President Hubert Humphrey, I told him of our investigative report on Penhurst and the deplorable conditions existing there. I then asked the Vice President what is being done nationally on the problem of mental retardation and what more can be done.
Well, as you may know, there is what we call the President's Committee on Mental Retardation. Mrs. Humphrey serves on that committee by appointment. We have a very special interest in this whole subject of mental retardation. Our first granddaughter was born retarded, yet she is a beautiful child, and we have seen what can be done with love, and it takes lots of love and care, and with specialized training. Now, we're more fortunate than some people. We are able to send our Vicky off to a private school that has good facilities and good teachers. But many people can't do that. They can't afford that. I've seen what can happen when you get good training. Many of the retarded are trainable to become self-sufficient, or that is, earning people, to become productive people. I want to quickly say to you that you will never in your life ever make an investment that is more worthy and more worthwhile. The love that comes back from a mentally retarded child is God's true love. It really and truly is. I get more joy out of our little Vicky than almost any experience that I've ever had or any child I've ever known. Going back to your subject again, this is very close to my heart. If you can care for a child at home, that's the best place. But there are many that you can't. Therefore, they need institutional care.
How can we help them with more money?
Well, the federal government is putting up a sizable sum of money now, but not nearly enough. And state legislatures have simply got to remember that every child is entitled to all the protection and care that you can give that child. Now, we go ahead and give ordinary children, that is, normal children, a reasonably good education. But the subnormal child, the mentally disturbed, the mentally retarded child is also entitled to care, also entitled to all the education that child can absorb. He can't maybe absorb as much as somebody else, but he's entitled to all that he can get. And in our school systems, we must have specialized facilities and special teachers. for the mentally disturbed and the mentally retarded child. They're different, the disturbed and the mentally retarded. Then we must be willing to invest in these institutions to make them not prisons, not a place to shove somebody away and forget them, but rather a home of love and affection and attention and training. It can be done. It requires some money, but a rich society like ours can do it now. We've started in the federal government. For the first time in the last 3 years, we have a federal program of assistance for mental retardation facilities and training. Those programs are working. That program is working. We're helping, I've forgotten now the number, better than 100 schools in this. But much more can be done.
On specifics, the Vice President told me of his great pleasure on visiting the school attended by his granddaughter, Vicky. I again pointed out the very different conditions Bill Baldini found at the Penhurst School for the mentally retarded. This was his reaction.
Institutions are sometimes pitiful, just pitiful, disgraceful. And we just can't tolerate that, John. It's not right. We just can't look ourselves in the mirror when you know what goes on in some of these institutions. I don't know about your particular problem here, but let me tell you, if it's not good, then it's shameful. Because this rich country, this great country, and I must say it is very great and very rich, can afford to take care of the least of these.
You're watching NBC10 News at 4.
We have a special report now on how a series of investigative reports by NBC10's Bill Baldini 3 decades ago helped spark dramatic changes in the care of the mentally disabled.
Larry Menti is here with more on that story. Larry?
Journalism, the very word Penhurst brings back powerful and disturbing memories for people in the Delaware Valley. It was a state hospital housing the mentally disabled and the mentally ill. It wasn't until a powerful series of investigative reports by NBC10's Bill Baldini 34 years ago that the horrors of Penhurst finally ended. We want to warn you in advance of this. The images in this report could be disturbing to some viewers. The images are shocking. Children lay shackled like criminals, confined to their own beds, confined to lay in their own human waste.
We entitle our investigative report, Suffer the Little Children.
In 1968, a younger NBC10 reporter, Bill Baldini, exposed the deplorable conditions of Penhurst State School and Hospital, an institution for the mentally retarded in Chester County.
You know, this was a hangover from the 16th century. You know, if someone was different, you hit them away.
He recalls the powerful 5-part series that aired after he followed up on a tip about abuses and neglect at Penhurst.
And I remember my comment was, if 1/10 of what you're telling me is true, it's a great story. And 100% of what they said was true.
Bill and his camera crew spent 5 days inside Penhurst.
I never saw anything like that in my life.
They exposed how the shoddy, run-down facility housing 2,800 was grossly overfilled by 800 patients, with far too little staff to help out, and how that overcrowding seriously impacted patient care.
You go into a ward and you see 80 metal cribs, and with those sticky things for flies over each one, and 80 kids wallowing in their own feces from maybe 5 months to 4 or 5 years old, and there are 2 people taking care of them. If you're a parent, you have a tough enough time to take care of 2 kids.
But key to Bill's story was the plight of the patients.
What would you like? If I can give you anything I could in the world, what would you want?
Oh, I'd like to get out of Penhurst.
Many people who lived at Penhurst revealed a quiet desperation.
When was the last time you had a visitor here?
1940.
1940.
They walked out on me.
Who walked out on you, Calvin?
My sister did.
Unless the state provides more competent personnel and facilities, they will remain just where they are, stripped of their dignity, lost to society.
Back in those days, they equated mental retardation with insanity. You know, if it said mental, it was all the same. So they actually put people in there who weren't mentally retarded, but had mental problems. Imagine that.
Bill's investigative reports help spark dramatic changes for the treatment of the mentally retarded, moving them from institutions into smaller community-based programs. After a long legal battle, Pennhurst eventually closed its doors.
The best thing in the world is to have that kind of impact where you actually made a positive difference in the world. And there are a lot of people alive today that are a lot happier now than they would have ever been if no one ever took a look at Pennhurst in 1968. So that makes me feel great.
Well done. In a few minutes, Bill introduces us to a few of those now happy former residents of Pennhurst. Two of them who met at the institution are now husband and wife. They'll tell us how their lives have dramatically improved since Bill's reports aired 34 years ago.
Up next, NBC10's Bill Baldini follows up on his landmark investigative reports of some 34 years ago.
He exposed abuses at Pennhurst State Hospital, a story that for some has a very happy ending.
Oh,
I feel like
I feel.
Meet Jerome and Carol. They suffered through Pennhurst to find a loving life with one another.
You're watching NBC10 News at 4. You're watching NBC10 News at 4.
Well, today we look back at a series of investigative reports on Pennhurst, a home for the mentally disabled in Chester County. 34 years ago, NBC10's Bill Baldini exposed inhumane conditions at the state-run institution. Those reports helped close the doors of Pennhurst forever. But what about the people who lived there? How are they doing now, some 34 years later? Well, Bill recently spoke with some former Pennhurst patients.
This report back in 1968, Suffer the Little Children, was the beginning of the end of Pennhurst.
When the institution first opened, the man in charge bitterly complained to the state that the conditions were already overcrowded.
It was no longer our dirty little secret, and the public outcry was angry and loud enough to get the state to pour $16 million into the institution. The money meant more staff, better food, and necessities like toilet paper. It also led to more humane treatment. What was it like?
like hell.
For the first time in years, patients were moved out into the community. Most were mildly retarded. Some had severe physical problems, but all of them were better off. Dr. Jim Conroy found the original Pennhurst patient journal and then tracked down each one of the residents.
What's amazing to most folks in our society is that none of those people are homeless, not a single one. Scientifically, we found out that their lives were enhanced almost off the scales. It's one of the most successful social programs of our generation.
Now, meet some of those former inmates today.
Oh, I feel like
Like you and yours, Jerome and Carol both held jobs for years. Now nearing retirement, they live in their own apartment and display a sense of pride and unconditional love.
I didn't ask for a better. I love you so much that I marry you because you're a beautiful woman, and you still are.
Then there is Roland Johnson. He was one of the people I spoke to in 1968. When Roland left the despair of Pennhurst, he brought hope to others.
He had 1,000 friends. He traveled the world, and he spoke about what it was like to live in an institution.
Lester Knock, as you can see, has severe physical problems today, but his quality of life in this group apartment makes him very happy.
What do you think would have happened to you if you stayed in Pennhurst?
I don't think I'd be alive.
You don't think you'd be alive? You know what, Lester? I don't think you'd have been alive either.
Dr. Conroy claims that Pennhurst and studies that followed influenced the release of 130,000 Americans from institutions and a change of attitude throughout the world. As impressive as the numbers are, it's the survivors who make the most pertinent statements through their honesty and humanity. Thank you. Hang in there, okay?
Oh, I'm happy.
This is Pennhurst today, and the big difference between now and then is there's no screaming, no cries for help. Pennhurst closed in November of 1987, and let me tell you something, no one shed any tears. Bill Baldini, NBC10 News.
This is NBC10 News at 5.
My initial reaction to the film was recollection. I remembered. I first visited Penhurst in 1970, and that is what it was like. And I was shocked to think how much I had forgotten. In the years since 1970, so much has happened, it's hard to remember, it's hard to describe. I had the opportunity while working at Temple to perform a study of the well-being of the people who used to live at Penhurst. We followed all of those people in all of those years. In 1978, Judge Broderick ordered that all the people living at Penhurst had to move out of Penhurst and into decent home-like settings in the community. As of today, they have all moved. That's something that's never happened anywhere else in this country or any other country I've ever heard of. Institutions have closed, but never by moving all the people into community settings. It's always been by moving at least a large proportion of them into other institutions. Here in this one place at this one time, that didn't happen. It was done right. During the research, we were able to follow every person, visit every person every year, survey every family every year. We collected information about every person's integration, satisfaction, if they were able and willing to speak to us, we interviewed them. Their adaptive behavior, that is, independent functioning, how much they can do for themselves rather than having it done for them. Their challenging behaviors and what they did during the day and the amount of service they received, the cost of their care, and we really have an immense amount of information about each individual, all with one research question in mind. Are they better off than they were when they were at Penhurst in 1978? And before I tell you what we found out, I want to mention that Penhurst in 1978 was not what we saw on that film in 1968. Penhurst in 1978 had improved enormously. In fact, by 1979, Penhurst had been fully certified by the federal government, qualifying for federal money because it met the federal government standards for facilities of that kind. So Penhurst had improved immensely by the time we started this study. So we were comparing a much better institution with a community program that was fairly new and experimental. Well, the comparison was completely one way. The results were, in English, yes. The average person living at Penhurst left Penhurst, went into a group home or CLA, and was much better off in every way we measured. Every way. Their families were much happier, and families resisted them. But after it happened, they accepted it and were delighted with it. They did have a concern about how permanent this new community service system would be, but they did find that they were surprised that they had initially disagreed with the idea. The individuals themselves, those who were willing and able to speak with us, and that was about half, found that they were happier in their new group homes than they had been at Penhurst. And again, they had been happy at Penhurst, but they were happier in the CLAs. The behavior of people has changed markedly. It changed as soon as people were placed, for the better, and it continues to change year after year as we follow and assess the well-being of the individuals who used to live at Penhurst. Adaptive behavior has increased and continues to increase every year. Challenging or maladaptive behaviors decrease year after year. And on top of that, the qualities of the environments in which people are living have markedly improved. Penhurst was very low on things like individualization, normalization, and simple physical quality. Community living arrangements are higher in all of those dimensions, so they're in better places, and they are better off. According to them, according to their families, according to the services they're receiving more service now. And when all things are considered, including staff salaries, the cost to society should be about the same. No greater cost, but much greater benefits.